He didn't ask for much, just a fleeting touch of history, a whispered memory in cold steel. But in that pristine showroom, his quiet dignity met arrogant dismissal. They laughed, they mocked, they told him to leave. What they couldn't see was the storm gathering in his wake, a tempest born not of rage, but of an unbreakable, silent brotherhood. This isn't just a story. It's a thunderclap of truth in a world that often forgets. Before we unravel this powerful tale of profound disrespect and unyielding loyalty, tell us, where in this incredible nation are you watching this story unfold today? And if you believe true heroes walk among us, unseen but never forgotten, smash that subscribe button now. These are the stories that matter. The place was called the Steel Citadel, a monument to modern tactical gear and high-end firearms, perched on the edge of town like a metallic beast overlooking the mundane. Its facade was imposing, all polished chrome and darkened glass, hinting at a world of serious hardware within. Inside, racks of sleek black rifles lined the walls like trophies of a forgotten war, each one gleaming under the cold LED lights. Glass counters displayed handguns too perfect, too polished, to ever look real, each reflecting the indifferent glow of the overhead fluorescents. The air was thick with the scent of gun oil and new plastic, a manufactured atmosphere of simulated power. Behind the massive fortified register, two young men, alpha bros, as some would call them, leaned over their phones. Their faces illuminated by the blue light of their screens, they were half listening to the aggressive thump of country rock, playing from concealed speakers. The store wasn't busy. It rarely was. This was the kind of establishment that thrived on image, on the fleeting thrill of perceived authority, making its money not on genuine expertise, but on the aspiration it sold. They were sales figures, not custodians of history, completely disconnected from the profound human stories that their merchandise often represented. At precisely 10:43 a.m., the automatic front doors chimed, a surprisingly soft sound swallowed by the store's hard surfaces. The man who entered didn't command attention. He simply existed in a way that made everything else feel a little quieter, a little less significant. His worn boots, the leather cracked and familiar, whispered of countless miles. His jeans, patched meticulously at the knee, suggested a life lived through labor, not leisure. A brown leather jacket, older than half the staff combined, hung loosely on his frame. His face, etched with the fine lines of time and weathered by forgotten suns, was calm, almost serene. His eyes, though, under the brim of a faded, sweat-stained SEAL Team 7 cap, were impossibly sharp, missing nothing, yet revealing nothing. He moved slowly, deliberately, his purposeful limp a subtle rhythm against the polished concrete floor, noticeable but never pitiful. He didn't glance around at the impressive displays, didn't gawk at the price tags. His gaze was fixed. He walked straight to the main counter, his hand coming to rest gently on the cool glass. And then he waited. A profound, almost ancient patience radiated from him, an unspoken command that eventually pierced the clerk's digital haze. One of the young men, Jace, looked up, a forced, practiced smile snapping onto his face. "Need something, sir?" he chirped, his voice laced with the eager artificiality of a fresh sales trainee. The old man, Sergeant Elijah Eli Vance, nodded once. His voice was raspy, like gravel over steel, but even calm. "Yeah," he said. "I was wondering if you still carry the M1903 Springfield replica from the back wall. The real stock model, not the tricked-out modern stuff." Jace blinked. His practiced smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. "That's a collector's piece? Not something you'd really want to fire. He mimed shooting a toy rifle at the ceiling, a childish smirk spreading across his face, earning a snicker from his colleague Brett, who was still half hidden behind his phone. Eli's gaze remained steady, unwavering. "I didn't ask to fire it," he said, his voice dropping slightly, the calmness somehow more unsettling than anger. "Just wanted to hold it for a moment. Haven't touched one in, well, decades." His hand on the glass tightened imperceptibly. A fleeting memory, a flicker of distant sun and dust, playing out in the deep lines around his eyes, a moment only the audience could witness. Brett, the older clerk, finally looked up, a condescending chuckle rumbling in his chest. "That rifle's heavier than it looks, Pops. Might be a bit much for your back. You know, for a man your age?" He glanced pointedly at Eli's limp. Eli's eyes, though calm, held a subtle challenge. He didn't smile. He just said, his voice still low, controlled, "I used to carry one across jungles, through mud that swallowed men whole. I can manage it across a showroom floor." The words hung in the air, a whisper of a world they couldn't comprehend. That was when the tone irrevocably changed. Jace snorted, then laughed too loud, a brittle, dismissive sound. "Okay, Rambo. Unless you're buying, you're just taking up space. Let the real customers in." He gestured vaguely at the empty store. Brett, emboldened, added, "Yeah, we're not a museum, Grandpa. This is a business. Maybe try a library if you're looking for history." He gestured to a cheap, mass-produced hero poster on the wall beside him. A generic soldier in a modern uniform. A stark, ironic contrast to the quiet legend standing before them. Eli paused. For a second, a fractional beat, it looked like he was going to say something. Maybe correct them. Maybe remind them exactly who he was. The air in the room, already heavy with unspoken history, seemed to thicken further. But instead, his gaze dropped to the counter, his thumb slowly tracing a worn groove in the glass. He nodded almost imperceptibly to himself, a silent understanding passing between him and his own inner world. "Understood," he simply said, his voice a quiet resignation that somehow cut deeper than any shout could have. Then he turned around. He walked to the door, his limp a steady, rhythmic cadence against the silence. No protest, no anger, no demand to speak to the owner. Just one man, alone again, walking slowly back toward the edge of a country that, in its rush for the new and the shiny, had forgotten what some men had quietly given for it. The automatic doors chimed softly as he exited, a final, almost mournful sound. Inside, Jace and Brett went back to scrolling their phones, oblivious, dismissing the encounter as just another bothersome old-timer. Neither of them noticed the woman by the survival gear section, Lena Petrova. In her late 40s or early 50s, Lena's appearance was as understated as Eli's. A plain cap pulled low, practical outdoor clothing. But her eyes, sharp and intelligent, missed nothing. Her posture spoke of disciplined movement, her gaze an unwavering line of observation. She had watched the entire scene unfold in silence, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly with each dismissive word. She waited 2 minutes, letting the digital hum of the store settle back into its superficial rhythm. Then, Lena Petrova stepped outside. She pulled a phone from her pocket. Her movements were precise, economical. She made one single call, and in a voice devoid of emotion, yet chillingly precise, she said 3 words. He was here. The impact of those words was immediate. Across the city, a quiet network of communication, unseen by the general public, began to stir. Not sirens, not emergency calls, but a ripple of informed precision. At exactly 11:43 a.m., The parking lot in front of the Steel Citadel began to fill, but not with customers. A matte black, unmarked tactical SUV, its windows tinted to an impenetrable sheen, pulled in and parked close to the entrance. The engine stayed on, a low, ominous hum. A minute later, another parked silently beside it. Then a third, equally dark and featureless. No music blared from their windows, no casual movement. Just quiet, humming machines with dark glass and even darker intentions. Inside the store, Jace and Brett were still joking, still scrolling through their phones, completely unaware that the very atmosphere outside was shifting, growing heavier, charged with an unspoken promise. They had dismissed a legend, and now the legends were coming. The hush in the Steel Citadel parking lot was unnerving, a silent prelude to the storm that was about to break. Jace and Brett, still engrossed in the mundane glow of their phone screens, joked about their next sales quota, completely oblivious to the tightening atmosphere. Then, with an almost imperceptible whoosh, the massive glass doors of the Steel Citadel seemed to recede, rather than simply open. 12 figures, moving with the disciplined precision of a single formidable entity, stepped into the sterile light of the showroom. Their movements were deliberate, unhurried, yet they carried an undeniable weight that made the very air feel heavier, forcing people to stop mid-step, their casual chatter dying on their lips. They weren't loud, they didn't shout. But something about their collective presence, their unwavering focus, made the sprawling showroom feel impossibly small. Some wore civilian clothes, dark, unassuming, but tailored to hint at formidable physiques beneath. Others wore dress uniforms, crisply pressed, adorned with rows of ribbons that told tales only a select few could read. Most, however, didn't need either. The way they walked, the silent communication in their synchronized steps, the almost imperceptible scanning of the surroundings. It told you exactly who they were. They crossed the polished concrete floor, their boots making no discernible sound, and fanned out in a calm, chillingly precise semicircular formation, every eye locking onto the counter where Jace and Brett sat, oblivious. Not a single word was spoken. Their very presence was a statement, a silent, unyielding demand for attention. The youngest clerk, Jace, still slumped on his stool, barely looked up from his phone. "Welcome in, gents. Looking for anything specific today?" he chirped, his voice thin and reedy in the sudden, profound silence. He offered a practiced, insincere smile, his eyes still mostly on his screen. Then, slowly, he glanced up and froze. His smile evaporated, replaced by a dawning horror as he saw them. 12 men, absolutely still, absolutely quiet. Their eyes locked on him with an unnerving intensity. The oldest among them, a man whose presence filled the entire space, stepped forward. This was Commander Thorne. His graying hair was neatly cropped, his square jaw set with a grim determination. His chest, broad and powerful, bore rows of ribbons that gleamed under the cold lights, and emblazoned unmistakably on his uniform was the gold trident of a Navy SEAL. His voice, when it came, was not loud, but it hit with the force of a physical blow, cutting through the heavy silence. "An hour ago," he said evenly, his eyes fixed on Jace. "One of us walked through this door." Jace, visibly uncomfortable, cleared his throat. He darted a nervous glance at Brett, who had finally put his phone down and now looked pale and agitated. "Sir, I think there's a misunderstanding," Jace stammered, his usual swagger completely gone. Commander Thorne cut him off, not with words, but with a look alone. It was a look that conveyed an entire lexicon of disapproval, a silent command that brooked no argument. "He didn't come here to be honored," Thorn continued, his voice still low, yet resonating with an unyielding power. Didn't ask to be recognized. He just wanted to see a rifle he hadn't touched since Vietnam. Thorn paused, letting the words hang in the air. A silent accusation. Your staff, he articulated, each word a hammer blow, laughed, called him grandpa, told him to leave. His gaze intensified, boring into Jace. You didn't ask who he was. You didn't care. Then, with a deliberate, almost ceremonial slowness, Commander Thorn reached into his uniform pocket. He pulled out a small, rectangular object. It was a scorched flag patch, the red and white stripes faded to almost nothing, the blue field blackened, but the embroidered stars still faintly visible beneath the grime. It was folded and worn, softened by years of friction against combat fatigues, steeped in untold stories. He placed it gently on the counter, directly in front of the two stunned clerks. He pulled this off my uniform, Thorn stated, his voice now laced with a raw, undeniable emotion that made the air prickle, when I was bleeding out in Helmand. Carried me out on foot. 22 hours with no radio, no backup, and a hole in his side the size of a fist, through enemy lines. He never told anyone about it, never asked for thanks, never sought a medal. But when he walked in here today, quietly seeking a moment of peace, you treated him like a problem, a nuisance, a piece of unwanted trash. Jace swallowed hard, a visible bob in his throat. His eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and dawning comprehension, flicked desperately toward the back door, as if hoping for a miraculous escape route that wasn't there. Brett, equally terrified, stood frozen, unable to move or speak. Commander Thorn didn't move. He simply stood, a pillar of quiet strength, letting his words sink in. We're not here for revenge, he reiterated, his voice softening just a fraction. We don't need an apology. We don't need headlines, but he won't speak for himself, so we're speaking for him. Another SEAL, younger, but with eyes that held the same ancient wisdom as Thorn's, stepped forward. He reached into a tactical pouch and carefully, reverently, placed a grainy, black and white photograph on the polished glass counter. It showed 8 men, arms slung over shoulders, their faces caked in dust, sunburned, but smiling with an untroubled camaraderie. They were young, full of raw, fearless energy. The man in the center, unmistakable even in his youth, with that same steady gaze and a subtle, almost imperceptible half-smile that said nothing and everything at once, was Sergeant Elijah Eli Vance, the very man they had mocked an hour ago. Jace's mouth opened slightly, a small, choked sound escaping him. I didn't know, he whispered, the arrogance completely stripped from his voice. Commander Thorn nodded slowly, his expression unwavering. Exactly, he said, the single word a devastating indictment. You didn't ask. No threats, no demands, just truth, delivered with the chilling force of absolute certainty. Then Commander Thorn turned. The other 11 SEALs, moving as one, followed. They walked out the same way they came in, without fanfare, without sound, leaving behind them a silence no bullet could replicate, a silence that hummed with a profound, undeniable message. Outside, a small crowd had started to gather, drawn not by shouting or sirens, but by an instinct, a primal pull toward something significant. Phones came out, not immediately to film, but to record, to capture the weight of the moment, just in case they forgot how it felt to witness something like this. The SEALs didn't acknowledge them. They didn't need to. They simply got back into their matte black vehicles, the engines rumbling quietly to life. One after another, the imposing SUVs pulled out, driving off as if nothing had happened, disappearing into the hum of the passing traffic. but something had happened. Inside the Steel Citadel, the air didn't return to normal. It hung heavy, thick with the weight of unspoken realization. Jace slowly slid off his stool, staring at the photo and the scorched patch still sitting on the counter. His face was ashen. Brett stood rooted to the spot, his eyes fixed on the empty doorway. For the first time, they realized they hadn't just thrown out an old man. They had dismissed history, a living legend. And now, the entire world was about to learn who they'd really pushed out the door. The consequences were just beginning to unfold. The silence that settled over the Steel Citadel after the SEAL team departed was not empty. It was loud. It vibrated with the weight of unspoken truth, a stark contrast to the casual disrespect that had filled the air moments before. Jace and Brett remained in stunned silence, their youthful arrogance shattered, staring at the flag patch and the faded photograph on the counter. They were caught in the eye of a storm they couldn't possibly have foreseen. A tempest that had already begun to brew beyond their tinted windows. Within minutes of the SEAL's departure, the manager of the Steel Citadel, a burly man named Arthur Vance, no relation to Eli, but a distant, almost forgotten connection through shared military service surfaced later, arrived. His face was pale, his phone clutched in one trembling hand. The screen ablaze with notifications. The photo had been sent to him twice already before his tires even hit the parking lot. Arthur didn't blame the clerks, not truly. He understood the profound gravity of their mistake better than they could. He didn't even speak to them, the silence between them a more potent form of reprimand than any shouted words. With a solemn, almost reverent gesture, Arthur walked to the glass display case that housed the M1903 Springfield, the very rifle Eli Vance had asked to see. He unlocked it, his movements slow and deliberate, as if handling sacred relics. He carefully lifted the rifle, placing it gently on the counter beside the photo and the scorched patch. Then, from beneath the counter, he retrieved a clean sheet of paper and a simple pen. His hand, though usually firm, trembled slightly as he wrote. He slid the handwritten note into a clear plastic frame and placed it next to the rifle. The inscription was simple, yet profound, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. He carried it once. We'll carry the memory now. No fanfare, no grand pronouncements, just a quiet, powerful act of remembrance that spoke volumes. The digital world, meanwhile, had caught fire. By 1:45 p.m., the photo Commander Thorne had left, that haunting image of 12 silent men standing guard in the gun shop had already gone explosively viral across 3 major veteran Facebook groups. It had been taken by Lena Petrova, the quiet woman by the ammo rack, who had shared it with a single potent caption: "When you disrespect a SEAL, you get all of them." At first, most people didn't understand the context. The post was shared and reshared, often accompanied by nothing more than the poignant American flag emoji or a simple respect. But the human need for narrative, for meaning, quickly took hold. Then someone asked the crucial question in the comments: who was the old man they were standing for? And that's when everything changed. The internet, a relentless engine of information, began to dig. By 2:12 p.m., a name, whispered at first, then shouted across forums and social media feeds, emerged from the digital ether: Sergeant Elijah Eli Vance. A man who had been seen around town for years, a quiet fixture, always polite, always alone, always wearing that same beat-up, faded SEAL Team 7 cap. No one had ever asked what it meant. Until now. The online community, fueled by a collective sense of injustice and a profound respect for service, became a relentless truth finder. One commenter wrote, "Eli Vance? He was my uncle's CO in '91. Saved 3 men in Panama. Didn't talk about it once after coming home." another added, with a sense of awe. If that's Beckett, we're talking about a real ghost. The kind of guy you only hear about in briefings, never in the news. The narrative began to form, patch by patch, memory by memory. Someone, working tirelessly in the depths of a military archive, found a grainy, scanned personnel summary and uploaded it under the photo. The details hit like a thunderclap. Master Chief Special Warfare Operator James Charles Beckett. SEAL Team 7. Joined in 1970, retired in 2008. Bronze Star, Silver Star, 2 Purple Hearts. The list went on. Multiple unlisted commendations. Records showing service across Vietnam, the unforgiving sands of Grenada, the dense jungles of Colombia, the treacherous mountains of Afghanistan, and the war-torn streets of Iraq. Over 40 confirmed personnel extractions in hostile zones. The resume of a living legend. No autobiography, no press coverage, no interviews, just decades of silence, decades of doing the job. By 3 p.m., the local news station had picked up the story. It wasn't a sensationalist report. The sheer weight of the facts precluded it. The segment was titled simply, Silent Visit. 12 Navy SEALs show up at gun store in support of local veteran. The article gave no dramatic embellishments, just the raw facts. A man had come in. He had been asked to leave. An hour later, a team arrived, and suddenly, a quiet, overlooked figure had become a symbol of everything people had forgotten to respect. At the Steel Citadel, the silence hadn't lifted. Jace and Brett hadn't spoken to one another in over an hour. Their previous bravado replaced by a palpable sense of shame. The photograph left behind by the SEALs sat on the counter, a silent, powerful indictment. It showed 8 men in a stark black-and-white group photo, dusty and sunburnt in a barren desert landscape. They were young, their eyes hard and focused, but with a camaraderie that transcended the harshness of their surroundings. Eli Vance was in the middle, standing with arms crossed, that faint half-smile playing on his lips, a smile that said nothing and everything at once. Customers who came in later that afternoon didn't ask about ammunition or tactical gear. They asked who the man in the photo was. They asked if he was coming back. One older customer, a burly Marine from Desert Storm, walked straight to the counter, stood for a full minute, his gaze fixed on the photo, then saluted it sharply, a quiet act of profound respect that transcended generations and specific conflicts. He then turned and walked out without saying a word. His silence, too, was a statement. By 4 p.m., a veteran-owned publication known for its fierce loyalty and unwavering support for military personnel published a short piece that echoed across the internet. It was titled, with chilling simplicity, "The Ones Who Stand When You're Gone." It ended with a line that would be quoted thousands of times over the following days, becoming a rallying cry for silent heroes everywhere. James Beckett didn't need to speak. His silence was covered by 12 voices, who chose not to raise theirs either. Back inside the Steel Citadel, Arthur Vance, the manager, watched the subtle shift in the store's atmosphere. He knew this wasn't about sales anymore. It was about something far deeper. His store, once just another business with a cash register and a rack of tactical gear, was becoming something else entirely. It wasn't about weapons anymore. It was about memory. People came not to shop, but to reflect. Veterans walked through the door, not with a list of items to buy, but with stories of their own. Some left patches from their own units, resting them gently beside Eli Vance's photo. Others asked quietly, reverently, "Is he okay?" No one really knew. The truth was, Sergeant Eli Vance hadn't changed his routine. He still walked 2 miles every morning before the sun climbed too high. his steady limp a familiar sight on the quiet suburban streets. He still stopped at the Morning Star Diner, a local institution known for its strong coffee and quiet booths, for black coffee and no sugar. He still sat alone at the back booth, the one no one ever asked to share, a silent observer of the morning rush. And he never once mentioned the day he was thrown out of the Steel Citadel, or the men who showed up behind him. Not to the talkative waitress, not to the gruff cook, not even to the old Marine who sometimes nodded at him from across the room, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. But people noticed anyway. When the local high school, eager to embrace community involvement, invited veterans to speak in history class, Sergeant Vance didn't reply. He hadn't sought public acclaim in his service, and he certainly wouldn't now. But the week after the invitation, the principal, a former military man himself, received a small, unassuming envelope. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. It contained a handwritten letter, simple yet powerful, describing a daring rescue operation in 1970. No name, no signature, just a map reference and the names of the 6 men saved. The principal, recognizing the profound humility and the quiet heroism embedded in the act, had it framed. It was hung in the school hallway, not with a grand ceremony, but quietly, respectfully, a subtle addition to the school's history. It became a new, unwritten chapter in their curriculum, reminding students that not all heroes wore capes, and not all stories were told loudly. The story made its way across veteran forums, then onto talk radio, then quietly, almost imperceptibly, into policy meetings no one reported on. Because what happened that day wasn't a protest. It wasn't a fight. It was something rarer, something more profound. It was men standing for one of their own, without saying a word. And the message, carried by the silent currents of profound respect, was received. The ripples of recognition were just beginning to spread. 2 weeks stretched into an eternity for some, for others, a blink. The memory of the silent visit to the Steel Citadel continued to echo through the town, a quiet hum beneath the surface of daily life. The gun shop, once a symbol of casual commerce, had become a quiet monument, a place where the air felt different, charged with a new reverence. And then, without warning, the SEAL team returned. But this time, they didn't go to the Steel Citadel. Their destination was far more personal, far more profound. They came to the Morning Star Diner. The diner was a local institution, a cozy, familiar place nestled on a tree-lined street, its neon sign a beacon of warmth against the cool morning air. Inside, the scent of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon mingled with the comfortable chatter of regulars. It was a place of routine, of comfort. A stark, almost poignant contrast to the imposing chrome and glass facade of the Steel Citadel. Sergeant Elijah Eli Vance sat at his usual back booth, a faded newspaper spread before him, a steaming mug of black coffee, no sugar, cradled in his worn hands. His gaze was fixed on the street outside, a quiet observer of the everyday world. Then the doors of the Morning Star Diner opened. There was no dramatic entrance, no sudden surge of noise. They simply walked in one by one. 12 figures. The same quiet discipline, the same palpable sense of purpose, but now softened by the familiar warmth of the diner's light. They didn't take a table. They didn't make a scene. They simply walked directly to Eli's booth, forming a loose, respectful semicircle around him, their movements fluid and coordinated, like an unspoken ballet. And then they stood, silently, watching him sip his coffee, waiting. Eli Vance slowly lowered his mug. His gaze, calm as ever, lifted to meet theirs. For a second, no one in the diner breathed. The morning chatter died. The clinking of cutlery stopped. All eyes were on the booth, on the quiet veteran, and the 12 formidable figures who surrounded him. It was a moment of profound, unspoken understanding. Then, the youngest among them, a man whose face was smooth and unlined, who hadn't even been born when Eli had left the service, stepped forward. His voice was soft, almost a murmur, but clear and respectful. "Sir," he said, his gaze meeting Eli's, "if it's all right, we'd like to sit with you." Eli Vance nodded once, a slow, deliberate nod. Without another word, the SEALs began to fill the booth, some sliding in next to him, others pulling up chairs, creating an intimate, almost sacred circle around him. They simply were. And for the next hour, no one in the Morning Star Diner heard a single thing. No stories were told, no questions were asked, no boasts were made. But everyone there remembered the silence, because it spoke louder than anything else ever could. It was a symphony of understanding, a testament to an unspoken code. This extraordinary series of events, from the dismissive sneer in a gun shop to the reverent silence in a diner, offers profound lessons, etched not in stone, but in the collective consciousness of a community. First, the true essence of heroism lies not in recognition, but in quiet dedication. Eli Vance, Master Chief Special Warfare Operator, a man who survived Helmand and Panama, who pulled Thorne out of a firefight with a fist-sized hole in his side, never sought fame or accolades. His deepest desire was simply to connect with a memory, a piece of his own past. He embodied the profound truth that valor isn't a headline. It's a heartbeat, a quiet commitment to duty that asks for nothing in return. His strength was internal, a fortress built of experience and unwavering integrity, rendering external praise utterly irrelevant to his self-worth. It begs the question, how many such quiet giants do we overlook in our daily lives? Just as a deep river runs silently, its power often unnoticed until it carves canyons. Second, loyalty and brotherhood are an unwavering code, a force far more potent than any weapon. The SEAL team's response wasn't born of rage, but of an unshakable bond. Their collective presence, their silent, coordinated arrival, their refusal to shout or threaten. This was the language of true brotherhood. They stood for one of their own, not for headlines or applause, but because it was their code, an intrinsic part of who they are. They demonstrated that genuine solidarity transcends rank, time, or circumstance. In a world often fragmented by self-interest, this unwavering bond serves as a powerful beacon of what true human connection can be. It reminds us that some promises are etched in a place deeper than any paper or badge. The promise to always stand for your brother, especially when he cannot, or chooses not to, stand for himself. Like ancient oak roots, invisible beneath the earth, yet holding the mighty tree against the fiercest storms. Third, society is called to look beyond the superficial. The initial dismissal of Eli Vance by Jason Brett was a stark mirror reflecting a societal tendency to judge by appearance, to prioritize superficial metrics over profound substance. They saw an old man with a limp, not a warrior. They saw a casual customer, not a living legend. This story forces us to confront our own biases, our own quick judgments. It's a poignant reminder that genuine strength often resides in humility, and that the quietest individuals often carry the loudest histories. It's a call to embrace empathy, to ask who someone truly is, rather than dismissing them based on fleeting impressions. The transformation of the Steel Citadel from a mere store to a place of reflection is symbolic of a community beginning to awaken, learning that true value isn't always polished or loud. A diamond in the rough unseen by hurried eyes, reveals its brilliance only to those who pause to truly look. Fourth, and perhaps most ironically, the most profound recognition often comes not from seeking it, but from quietly living a life worthy of it. Eli Vance wanted no part of the media frenzy. He remained in his quiet routine. Yet, through the actions of those who understood, his legacy became visible, not as a spectacle, but as a deep, resonant truth. The school hallway, with its framed letter of a forgotten rescue and the town's subtle shift in perception, are enduring testaments to this. It highlights that the most powerful legacies are built on authenticity and integrity, and that while fame is fleeting, true honor endures. The echoes of true greatness resonate not from a stage, but from the quiet chambers of history, heard only by discerning ears. The narrative of Sergeant Elijah Eli Vance is a powerful metaphor for countless heroes among us. It reminds us that the true heart of a hero beats not for glory, but for the quiet knowing of those who share the journey. Their valor is not always announced with trumpets, nor is their sacrifice always emblazoned on headlines. Often, it is a whisper, a silent understanding exchanged between souls who know the true cost of freedom. If this story has reminded you of a hero in your own life, a veteran, a first responder, a quiet community leader, or anyone who has made profound sacrifices without seeking the spotlight, tell us their name in the comments below. Share their quiet acts of courage, their untold stories. Say the things they never would, because they deserve to be remembered, to be seen, to be heard. Your engagement helps ensure these vital stories live on, passed from heart to heart. And if you believe these narratives must endure, if you believe that true courage should never be invisible, subscribe to NX Incredible Stories. We're here to make sure that men like Eli Vance are never forgotten. Their silence was earned. Now it's time we speak for them. And until then, if you ever see an old man standing quietly in a store, a diner, or a classroom, don't ask him what he's done. Don't demand his story. Just give him space. Give him respect. Because he's already done more than most could ever imagine. His legacy is etched not in headlines, but in the hearts of those he saved, and the quiet reverence of those who understand the true meaning of honor.